Welcome to the first interactive presentation for Mr. Rosen's 8th grade United States History class. Let's start off with our essential question. In this presentation we'll be looking at the events that we covered last year that helped lead to the founding of America. Hopefully this will be a review for most of you. This information is super important because it will help set the stage for the rest of our year. Without this it would be like missing the first part of a movie or the first few chapters of a book. It just wouldn't make sense. We will be talking about the United States before it was the United States. At first it was just a bunch of settlements but eventually became the 13 colonies which hopefully you've heard of at some point. If not, don't worry, you will now. You can't very well go to a new land before you've discovered it. Well, I guess if you fell into a black hole and popped out in it and it looked just like the old land but it really wasn't, so you were in a new land but didn't know it, and then monsters ate you and it got all weird. Usually though you discover it first, so let's look at that. Europeans were introduced to the Americas in 1492 by Christopher Columbus. Yes, I know, supposedly the Vikings came first. But hey, you know what? Vikings were mean and nobody liked them, so it didn't help even if they did. Columbus was the one who truly opened the West to Europe. His stated goal was to spread Catholicism to new lands. And his eyes that met China, which is where he initially thought he had landed. He also hoped to find easier access to Eastern spices which were very valuable. Well, he didn't find the East but instead the West. And he found gold, lots and lots of gold. This sparked great interest by many European kings and nations. Since Spain had funded Columbus, they laid claim to this new land. Before long they had conquered and colonized a great deal of the land and were sending back tons and tons of gold to Europe. Spain continued to grow in wealth and power, leaving other countries wanting their own piece. England in particular was interested in trading in the New World. Spain had no interest in letting that happen since the English were Protestants and Spain saw them as an enemy. This made England very sad. Even more, Spain was using the gold from the New World to build up their navy in the Old World, pushing England even further behind. Oh good, I was ready for a break. Did you know your brain likes to switch activities every 10 minutes? Well, it does. In this brain snack you will be presented with a historical problem and attempt to come up with a solution. Think logically and historically. History needs you. So, Spain built a massive navy. They claimed all of the land around South America and the Caribbean, you know, the place with all the pirates. The more they claimed, the more gold they got and the more power they got. England wants some of their own. Solve that problem. I'll just sit here and stare at you while you think for a bit. Well, what did you suggest? Did you say England should capture unicorns from rainbows and ride them into battle? That was my idea. I thought it was pretty good, but Mr. Roten just laughed at me and made me sit in the corner. It turns out that England had their own solution to the problem. They figured if Central and South America were claimed, they might as well go explore North America. Alright, problem solved. Just in case you didn't get that stuff written down, here's the key points again. Spain claimed the new lands since they got there first. The riches from these lands made them even stronger. Other European nations ultimately explored and settled areas further north. The land was just a small part of what would become America. The ideas that made it happen were perhaps even more important. These ideas go way back but really started showing up during the Reformation. When Martin Luther and the Reformers turned against the Pope and claimed that people were only subject to God, this led others to question why they were subject to anyone, particularly the kings. If God saves us all and we are equal before God, why should they get to rule us just because of their birth? It's a pretty interesting thought. These thoughts grew in a period known as the Enlightenment. During this time, thinkers started to question and define human rights, freedom and the powers of a government. John Locke, probably the most important thinker, argued that all men are created by God to be free. That was a radical idea at the time. Montesquieu mostly agreed but argued we still have to have a government of some kind to maintain that equality. Rousseau disagreed slightly, saying that putting aside our liberty is like putting aside our humanity and our duties as humans. Finally, another dude with sweet hair, Thomas Hobbes, said that the liberty nature gives us is the liberty to use our own power to defend ourselves. Though they all put slightly different spins on it, the general idea is that freedom is something that is natural to all men and that kings should not have absolute control over their subjects. Well, that was a lot of brain work. Let's take a quick break. So, those dudes all said liberty a bunch. How would you define liberty? I'm not going to give an answer yet, since this question will keep coming up over the next few months. Once again, in case you missed it, here's the notes from the previous section. I'll give you some time to make sure you've got what you need. So, we have a place and we have some motivation. All we need now is some people. The first English settlers settled on an island off the coast of what is now North Carolina called Roanoke. You're going to learn more about them in a lab in class, so we just kind of mix it in with the second colony, Jamestown, here for the presentation. These two groups of settlers came primarily to earn more money. They believed they would just show up, scoop up buckets of gold and go back to Europe rich. This was not the case. The work was hard and dangerous. The high-class settlers refused to do anything. It was so bad that a law was passed that if you didn't work you couldn't eat. That showed them how serious it was, but by then many were already dead. In Roanoke, their captain, out of desperation, returned to England for more food and supplies. When he came back, the settlers were all gone. Maybe dead, maybe not, but definitely gone. We'll look at what happened in the lab soon. In Jamestown things weren't much better. Luckily for them, the local natives helped them to survive by teaching them what plants would actually grow in the area. The most famous native was Pocahontas, who actually went to live in England for a while. Before long the friendship broke down and the natives left the settlers to survive on their own. They did survive, but barely. Nearly 90% of them died during a period called the starving time. Check out this description from one of the guys who was there. Yikes. Another group settled further north in an area called Plymouth. These settlers, commonly called the Pilgrims, were traveling mostly for religious reasons and had awesome hats and belts. Their faith was not legal in England, so they sought freedom in the New World. They believed that God had called them to build a civilization that showed off the greatness of God. Unlike the previous settlers, these guys were ready to work. They brought their whole families along with them and planned to stay. However, even with the proper ideas, the land was still extremely unforgiving. They suffered many of the same challenges as the other settlers, and a huge percentage of these settlers died as well. So you could say things got off to a pretty rough start. However, these settlers showed what would become known as the American frontier spirit. They didn't let these challenges stop them. They kept on building and kept on growing. This new world was worth a struggle. The land was unlike any they had seen before, with trees blanketing every bit of it. Any man from any birth could find land here to call his own, and he could be free to choose his religion while doing so. Even the king saw the value in these colonies. Many more colonies would start in the next few decades, most with financial support from the king. Ultimately 13 colonies were formed. Together they were many times larger than their mother country of England. They were separated by thousands of miles of ocean and months of travel time. Independence slowly started to creep in and a truly new world was born.